Hello and welcome to Avasant's Digital Forum, the Workforce of the Future, Diverse, Inclusive, and Digital. This event is in partnership with Cognizant. My name is Andriana Albert and I will be your MC today. Avasant is thrilled to have partnered with such an innovative organization to bring an hour of thought leadership and expert insights to our audience. Thank you again to Cognizant for your partnership. As we aim to make these events as interactive as possible, we encourage you to utilize the chat and Q&A features on your dashboard to pose questions to the panelists. They will be answering your questions live throughout the session. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to today's moderator, Renee Lati. Renee is the former CIO and CIDO at Hitachi Vantara and currently a principal and distinguished fellow at Avasant. Renee, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Andriana, thank you so much. And to our virtual audience out there, welcome to, I think, a very relevant and timely topic, as in this week. I'm sure we've all read several articles already about what's happening in the workforce as we're coming back out of COVID. So thank you very much for this. We have an amazing panel. So let's maybe start with that, is just a quick little background, and then we'll get into the introductions with the panel. Who would like to do a first introduction? Our panel, Kelly, welcome.
Sure, thank you so much. So I'm Kelly DeCourty and I work at Google Cloud, where I lead the go-to-market strategy and operations organization. So been very involved in both coming home in the first place and now the return to the office. So very pleased to be here with you today.
Thank you, Kelly. Sanjeev.
Thank you. Yeah, hi, Sanjeev Gosain. Very pleased to join the panel and thank you. I'm leading our business globally in artificial intelligence and also all the work we do with our partner Google Cloud. And I've been involved naturally as an employee, but also as someone who has a global team trying to navigate through this with people in the US, India, and Europe and other parts of the world as well. So happy to talk about this and share some experiences and learn some things as well.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Welcome. And Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Rinaldi. I'm a former CIO for Jet Propulsion Laboratory and FDA and others. And I'm an Avasant fellow as well. And currently at JPL, I'm looking at technology futures that will enhance our workforce and our capabilities. So I'm happy to be here. This is such a relevant and exciting topic to me.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. And for those of you that have tuned into a couple of my other panel sessions, I always like to set a little context. I mean, obviously, we're all talking about the workforce. I think we can all, whether we're the employee or the manager or the C-suite executive, we know that's top of mind as things begin to open. I know California just announced mid-January that they're more open than ever. I live here in Hawaii. We just announced some additional reopenings for us to be able to get out and get around and get back to the office. So it's very relevant. What does that mean from a diversity and inclusivity and a digital experience? So let's take a look, a little bit of research to set the context for today's conversation. So a couple things. This is from our Avasant research this past year. So some of it's pre-pandemic and some of it's during the pandemic. So we're all returning to the workplace. We ourselves are doing it, or our bosses are asking us to do it, or we as employees are thinking about doing it. Well, one of the things that we absolutely now know is that we're having to look at redesigning the office space. That is a trend, that is a research. And if you look, respondents to the survey are saying, hey, I'm gonna wait. And they say until 2021, because the survey was done in 2020, but I'm pretty sure they're still waiting. At high percentages in media and entertainment, business, banking, financial, insurance. We're waiting until we figure this out in a different, more redesigned office workspace, mostly due to social distancing. But if we look a little further into the data, you'll also see that it's also having to do with being a little more relevant to working remotely and working in a different kind of way. And I think employees are beginning to actually hold the upper hand on what does it mean to redefine a workspace. If we go to the next slide, again, and I'll just kind of set the context, and you all in the audience, the virtual audience, will get these slides so you can kind of double click down on some of this data. But the next one is really, I thought, fascinating because we're measuring employee productivity. And that starts the theme. And this is becoming a top priority for HR. And it started as we got into the pandemic. We've always cared about employee productivity, but the context of productivity and the how we do it And what we've learned from COVID, while we hope it never happens again, I think we can say there's a few silver lining learnings for corporate culture, especially for the top priorities of HR. So if we go to the next slide, it kind of shows you a little bit of the journey of those. HR is the center of really the enterprise in terms of disruption. If we said pre-COVID, our research said, well, there were themes like, well, we got to have operational efficiency, and we have to focus on attrition reduction, or hey, we need to start to gain some momentum around teleworking. Then all of a sudden we're in the middle of this, or starting to touch into the COVID world, and the conversation sounds like social media hiring. We need to do virtual onboarding. Those are our priorities in HR and for the company as a whole, for our culture. Maintaining business continuity, top of mind. Well, now let's talk about what it sounds like today. And this is kind of where we pick up with our panel around diverse, inclusive, and digital workforce. So if we look at that last long-term focus, we're talking about things like HR benefits tied to employee well-being. We talk about HR and the company culture of increasing remote working, emerging of new remote working models. We're also talking about what we call it a liquid workforce, or a hybrid roles, where we can kind of job share. And we focus on employees' experience and productivity, but we focus on the employee in a way that we've never focused on it before. Okay, and so this kind of is going to set the tone for what you're going to hear from our panelists and myself, just some storytelling, some experiences, and what, as we come out of COVID, we really need to look at to be with it as a company. And if you don't get some of these themes and you don't embrace them 100%, you will be left behind. So let's just get back to the panel, those beautiful faces on the screen, and we'll get started with a little bit of the questions. So the question number one, and we will, there's all our distinguished panel speakers. We've done that intro. Thank you. We'll come back and see all those faces now, hopefully. While you all are doing that, I'll set up the first question. So as we begin to reopen the office doors, and I said, literally, we're doing this in the last few weeks, last few days for some parts of the world, there is this theme about the power of hiring or staying with the company sits in the hands of the employees. And based on the topic of hand about workforce, and we're coming back out of COVID, and we've been working for a year and a half remotely, and I think doing quite well at it. The power of hiring sits in the hands of employees. I would like to hear from each of our panelists. Exactly what does that mean to you? And I'm going to start with Sanjeev.
Thanks very much, Renee. Yeah, I think, we work in a cognizant tech business, and what we're finding is that the need for technology, especially after the pandemic, people are accelerating their investment in digital. And so the kind of skills that me and our organization is largely looking for, digital technology-centric skills and people who are comfortable working remotely. And I think the expectation, that your comment about the power of hiring being in the hands of employees is very true, because there's a shortage of tech skills out there. So as we come out of COVID, that coupled with people's expectations being different, we are really, really seeing that we as an employer need to be a lot more flexible. We need to more allow for a hybrid workplace so that people are comfortable coming into the office, but also working remotely, as I have people in multiple parts of the world, but also opens up new ideas for new employees as well, to people who we might not consider before. And I think the thing with working remotely that we're all learning is that it takes effort to connect with people. And I just remember seeing an article today, actually, when I was thinking about this panel, from a study being done called The Great Resignation from one of the search firms, saying that in April of this year, 2.7% of people left their jobs, and about 25 to 40% of people are actively looking. And some of the reasons they left were a failure to connect with remote people. And I think that's the big learning, is we all connected a lot, perhaps a year ago here in the UK where I live, when people were initially going remotely, but did we slack off? Did we start maybe taking it a bit easy? So for me, it's about maintaining that connection as you move to a more sort of hybrid workplace. And it really will be important to make sure we maintain those connections from my perspective.
Thank you. So Kelly, the power of hiring sits in the hands of employees. How does that show up at Google, and what do you think that means?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think many people have probably seen from the press, but we at Google are going back to work in a hybrid mode where people are going to have the chance to spend some days in the office, some days with their customers, of course, and then some days at home as well. And it's been defined really based on different job profiles that people have in terms of where they can most effectively work. But certainly hybrid is the way forward for us in what we've defined. We're also giving employees a lot more choice. One around sort of where people work and how people will work. So we've been going through a process most recently, literally just launched last week, in terms of allowing people to define, you know, they've been working remotely, who wants to continue to work remotely, and frankly, who wants to maybe even relocate to a completely another location from where they are today. So those are sort of some of the things that we're going through as well, because we know that in order to retain top talent and employees, it's going to be really important to be innovative in this space. And that also is in terms of the sort of tools and systems that we give them to work with. And obviously we're lucky enough at Google to have Google Workspace, which is our collaboration set of tools, which has been really powerful for us during the pandemic and actually allowed us to really innovate with that tool set even further. There's nothing like a pandemic to kind of make you even speed up your innovation, but we'll continue to do that, ensuring that when people go back to the office, even in a hybrid mode, that it's very easy for them to navigate, easy for people to know when people are in the office or out of the office, and how to book desks and all other good things that will be part of that overall suite of technology.
That's great. Well, now I have to say, I do a lot of nonprofit work, and I've become very adept at Google Classroom. And again, these were kids, and none of us were used to all getting together for some of this nonprofit and kind of robotics work. And we did it all virtually through the Google Classroom. And that was actually, it was a blast. We had a fun time doing that. So yeah, those are great tools, Kelly. Jim, so I don't know about you, but a lot of the digital readiness assessment work I've been asked to participate in at Avasant, the digital no longer means tools and technology. It kind of means HR and culture. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think it's becoming much more of what am I a part of, and do I want to be a part of it? And so if you're an employee, you know, what did you join, especially if you're relatively new and you were hired on during COVID, you never been to an office, you were hired digitally, you met your boss digitally, so how does that all work now? Is that sort of like being before COVID, an Uber driver, where you have a car, but you don't need a car? And if you're the customer of Uber, you know, so how committed are you to a car? So how committed are you to a company in the same kind of thought of being a virtual worker? So the purpose of that company becomes extremely important. Now, I so happen to work at a very exciting place in Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We land things on Mars and we do research and science and things like that. So people have a purpose. But if you don't have that purpose, you know, where are you going to be? And you have choices today that maybe you didn't have before. And thanks to technology, you may have more choices than you ever thought about before.
So I know we have a couple of really good questions in our chat. I'm going to ask question 2 because I think it's kind of relevant. And then Adriana, let's go to some of those questions that are in the chat session. So question 2 kind of picks up on this. We talk about during the COVID era, we talked about the borderless office or the virtual office. And because of that, I think we've all heard, you all made similar comments. It's a more inclusive workplace. I know I start my day in Portugal and Denmark with my colleagues and clients, and I follow the sun to the US and the East Coast. And then I end up my day in Australia and New Zealand and Sri Lanka doing work. And I don't have to leave the comfort of my little chair and my bunny slippers are on with a cup of coffee in hand. And I think that creates much more inclusivity just around the globe. It feels smaller, but I think there's other ways to talk about inclusiveness, more diversity. And we've done this because of COVID, but we also are able to afford those with disabilities like hearing impairment individuals rely on live closed captioning, or some of us, believe it or not, I'm a little bit of an introvert, so it's easier for me to do this on my Brady Bunch screen sometimes than it is in person. You can use hand raise for features. There's things that we now have started to use, and we have much more diversity of thought because of these little boxes that we all been talking through for the last year and a half. How do we maintain that going back to the workplace? So Kelly, I'm going to start that one with you. What's Google doing? Can you share some stories of how you're incorporating tools and culture and inclusiveness to maintain whatever we're doing now?
Yeah, and sort of inclusiveness in culture is a really core part of sort of the DNA in Google. I actually remember when I went to my onboarding, which was not virtual, it was in person at the time, being really sort of impressed that there was sign language at the front, and then sort of the live closed captioning, just even to sort of welcome the new employees. And that has seen its way through the technology. So we do have things like you say, like raising the hand, like the closed captioning, as well as part of the tool set. And we also have a little plugin that I've been using with my team during this period of time, which monitors the percentage of time that you're talking, which is actually quite interesting, so that you don't sort of dominate conversations. And I know people have been using that as well to make sure that we hear from everybody when we're having meetings, and that it's not just sort of the one or two noisy ones that are talking, because like you say, Renee, when you're introverted, which actually my son is, interestingly, I was talking to the teachers about how to, he doesn't say as much on the classrooms, and like how to kind of get him to say more. And he was explaining that he feels kind of nervous. So the chat feature, the raising the hand feature. And I think what's going to be really important, what we've started to reimagine, is what a meeting's going to be like when we go back to the office, but you've got part of the audience in a face-to-face mode and part of the audience still in a virtual mode. And how can you make sure that you retain that inclusivity so that you don't get all of the discussion happening in the room? And so we don't have all of the answers, but we've been planning as a team to kind of imagine different meeting sets. So like, what does a forecast call look like for us in sales? What does a team meeting look like, and so on? And then how do we want to operate that? And how many people do we sort of expect to be physically in the office versus remote, and so on? And I think we're just going to have to see how it goes over time. I don't think, as we've said in some of the discussions we've had previously, it's not like there is a one size fits all. It all depends on a company, but definitely really important topics to work through as we come back to the office here.
Perfect. And Sanjeev, so tell me more about what maybe Cognizant's doing to try and balance that virtual offices, people come back to the bricks and mortar world as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think for us, it's really been going to the borderless office, if you can call it that, has been a real leveling, right? Just like Kelly was saying about the raising the hand. You don't get those, when you're in a meeting room and there's the dominant two personalities or one, and they sort of take over, and there's no mute button in person. Well, thank goodness for the mute button here, right? We could just put everyone on mute. So that's been a bit of a leveling, I think, and that's been actually quite useful. And what I've been doing is when we've been talking to some of the team, is talking about how do we bring everyone into the conversation? Because the other thing that has been perhaps the opposite of leveling is people can kind of hide on these online meetings, right? Sometimes some of the platforms have limited number of, like you said, the Brady Bunch thing, right? The number of boxes you can see. And if you're not on screen, you can just hide and get away. So how do you draw people in, ask them questions? So I think there's a bit of a two-way thing there with regards to that. And the other piece of inclusivity is also we can now access and bring into the workforce people who may not necessarily be able to come to the office, perhaps partners of military personnel, or who maybe are stationed on bases and things like that, right, somewhere else. That's been very important for us. And also people who necessarily can't leave town because their partner or someone has a career which requires them to be in person. So that's been really, really useful. And we did a study a while ago called Remtopia, which included responses from remote workers, and they found that those who were less able and less likely to be hired into an office job were more likely to be hired as a remote employee, and it didn't really come into it as such an obvious thing. So that's been fantastic around it in terms of that. And I think also the other piece is being able to do that. Obviously, it's been a cost saving as well for many. Around that as well, in terms of employers can save a certain amount of money as employees can. So that's been quite useful, I think. And there's one other thing I just wanted to mention is also there was a study done from Harvard Business School. one of the things I've been doing while I've been in lockdown is going for a daily walk. And of course, it's been great to listen to podcasts. I never knew so many podcasts existed in this world. But one of these podcasts is Freakonomics, which is a fantastic podcast, been running for years, right? And they had a professor from Harvard who's been doing this study called Work from Anywhere. And he did this study with people from the US Patent Office who moved to Tulsa and found they're actually more productive. And also, but the key thing is, as he looked at that study, is if you want people remotely, do you pay them less because of their location? And if someone's working from Tulsa, do you pay them less than someone who's doing the same job from San Francisco? Or do they level up? And that's a big question for a lot of employers as well, right? So this is raising new questions because the cost of living in San Francisco for a 2-bed apartment is $4K. Whereas in Tulsa, it's like $700 a month. That's a huge disparity, but if they're doing the same job. So it's been fascinating to learn all of this. And I think inclusivity is going to be more and more apparent as we move forward in this, as we come back from hopefully, consistently from lockdown.
Hey, Renee, if I could add to this, because I think both Kelly and Sanjeev have raised some very interesting points about workforce and how to manage the workforce. We're talking about a hybrid, but we need to also talk about how to manage in a hybrid. It's one thing for the employees to learn how to perform, and what does that mean and how do you measure it? But think about the management aspect of it. And especially if you have people who are in the office and people who are not in the office, is one disadvantaged over the other? And one CEO, former CEO, said at a recent Empowering Beyond event that Avasant hosted, is that there is a disadvantage if you're not getting that visual presence, that personal presence. That's right. In certain areas, you may be disadvantaged in your career. Now, that may change over time, and especially as we recognize it, that will change. But the fact is that we have to learn how to manage differently. I've had remote workforce for a long time, but I'm guilty and was guilty of ignoring or forgetting about the person on either a screen or the phone call because I was focused on the people in the room. How do you change those behaviors and traits? And hopefully we've learned quite a bit over the last year to do so. So I think those are very important points that we need to consider or do we need to retrain our managers to look at things differently than they have before? And then final point I want to bring up, because Sanjay brought this up, the workforce is not only working from anywhere, which has been a dream for a lot of us for a long, long time, but think about the technologies of the future that are going to allow for better translation. So you could not only work from anywhere, you could be in a different language. And Google is leading the way on that, quite frankly, in a lot of ways. And the collaboration tools are going to enhance that capability in the future to make that maybe even better. So let's say that as we look forward, what are the things that we need to do? And those are some ideas, in my opinion.
So there's a kind of the counterpoint to this hybrid and working remote versus working in the office. And Jim, you just said, for those physically in the office, sometimes it's easier as a manager. I think the other side, which is, I'm curious what your thoughts are, Sanjeev, Kelly, there's creating that virtual coffee break. So we all know, while we love working, or I personally love working remotely, I also know that I don't have time to walk down the hall with a cup of coffee or meet someone in the lunchroom to banter an idea or a challenge or a problem over having lunch with them. Like physicality there's benefits to it. And I'm curious what individuals have seen at their companies to create that virtual coffee break or that virtual lunchroom experience, because that is one of the things that is absent as we've been doing this in the pandemic virtually for the last year and a half. So Sanjeev, maybe.
Yeah, we've tried to do team is like virtual meals as well. There's drinks, of course, we're all up for that, but virtual meals like pizza delivery, and make sure that Julie, who's a vegetarian, does get the vegetarian pizza, and Jim does get the one with pepperoni because that's his favorite. And everyone opening at the same time, having that and trying to have that sort of more casual, not talk about work, just like you would do, in the evening. Obviously work usually comes up. So that's one sort of thing we try to do. But the other one I've heard, I haven't tried, but one of my associates did, was like random conversations where he would take his team, extended team, and basically you can have breakout rooms in a lot of these online platforms now, and just put two people together for 5-10 minutes, you know, he would call it a random chat. So you just like you bumped into them in the corridor and then you just catch up, and then you'd find these new nuggets of information, not in every conversation, but in some of those nuggets of information and just new ways of making connections with people, because at the end of the day, we are social animals, and you want to be able to make that connection with people. And sometimes for those who are perhaps more inhibited, it's a little bit not exactly real, but you know, sometimes you've got to get people out of the shell to make these connections. So virtual meals, random chats, those are the kind of things we try to do. And also go for walks. So encouraging people to go for a walk and then post their photograph and then talk about what they saw, and just to try and get that mind space a little bit different.
Right. Kelly?
Yeah, I mean,
what's
we've
Google
been doing very similar things. So having sort of walking meetings and encouraging people to sort of put walking meetings on their diary. We've had no meeting days, which is not a day off, but it's like a day to be off the screen and to kind of catch up on work, which has been important as well. And having different sort of team events. I've done all sorts of things this pandemic. I'm sure everyone has, like making different kind of cakes to decorating different things and painting and everything that we just sort of do as a team to try and foster, I think, discussion as well, because people talk a lot more about their families now or their personal life than they did before. So to try and keep that going as well as we get back to the office, that we recognize everybody for their sort of full self, not just their working self, I think will be really, really important here. So just a few things that we've been doing. I don't think particularly innovative compared with other people, but certainly something that we want to keep going and keep fostering that level of meetings and connection, as we go back to the office here in a hybrid mode.
Okay, all right.
I'll just say, if I can, Renee, I don't think this connection on online platforms is going away. So if people have ideas, maybe your attendees can post something on the chat as well.
Yep.
Give ideas, because I'm open for new ideas, right? I think there's only so much pizza I can eat, right? So good thing.
Well, I was going to say, so I think we're all talking about it, but what I like about it is saying, look, we don't have all the answers. What else you got? Which means it is still top of mind. I like the speed working. For those that are shy, or, I'm a big design thinker. So you drop somebody in, say you got 45 seconds, chat about something, and there's 3 of you in some type of a breakout situation. You learn really quick on how to think on your feet. It's like building a skill set sometimes that not everyone has the opportunity to do. And now we're doing it because of this virtualness. So I've done those, and those are a lot of fun.
Actually, Renee, just one thought that just came to mind for me, a story. So I have a first line manager who's in the team, doesn't report to me, but reports to one of my leaders. And I just did like a skip level check-in with him to see how he was doing. And one of the things that he was really missing as a first time manager was that coffee cooler conversation, because some of the things that he would like to learn from for other first line managers was not so easy, because you don't want to set up a call with someone to ask them the questions. It's sort of the types of things that he just wanted to share. So one of the things we started to work on was sort of peer group get-togethers as well, where it's like people can just chat about those kind of things that they might have done at the water cooler or the coffee corner, depending on what it was, for sort of interest groups. So just something that may be of use to people as well to think about.
That's awesome. Again, it's like the informality is important. It's sometimes hard to be informal when you're put on a screen for a meeting, right? So let's talk about, I think we've kind of moved into that, the employee and the work-life balance. I think we talked about going for walks, doing something so we're not staring at the screen all the time. And I think this is, as you saw in some of the Avasant data, this is an unprecedented year around employee wellness. Laser focus on it more than we've ever seen before. I think HR would tell you that is their biggest challenge, not because they've been unfocused on it before, but because it's a virtual borderless world and borderless office. There's local cultures. There's obviously COVID hits every part of the world differently. The policies and geopolitical layout is different globally, but the punchline is still around employee wellness and well-being. And I would be curious to hear how you all, each of your companies, are doing with that to prevent burnout. I mean, just staring at these screens all day long is not a good thing to be doing. And also creating engagement and, again, healthy mindset to continue in this work as we're going back to some type of a hybrid model. So Kelly, maybe I'll start with you. What other things is Google really looking towards or talking about doing to keep that employee wellness component top of mind?
Yeah, so this is sort of a core part of how we operated even before COVID. So I think it's probably well known, but we have things like, obviously fitness centers on the sites and massage rooms and other things to kind of really embrace employee wellness. And we have continued with some of that while we've been at home, giving people the ability to do online fitness classes as one of their employee perks, as well as credits for wellness or massage or other things that people want to do as part of their sort of day-to-day life. We also have been focusing on these no meeting days, like I said, and really trying to align the no meeting days where possible across major working groups. So either as part of what we call a PA or a kind of company, so Google Cloud in my standpoint, or at the total company level as well. So that, because there's one thing having a no meeting day, but if everyone else is working, that can be a problem. So trying to align that everybody's in the same boat at the same time has been really important. And then just tips and tricks, I think, for helping employees manage stress and wellness. So one of the things that I've been saying to my team is people have been struggling with, like, where does your day start and stop? Because everything's virtual, there's almost no start and stop to the day, because people know that people have been at home and therefore, emails can continue to be sent and so on. So we have something that is a delayed send that we've been using quite a lot. So for example, it may be useful for you to work over the weekend, but it doesn't mean that everyone else has to. That might be something that suits you. So to try and delay the send until 8 a.m. on Monday, unless it's urgent, so that people don't have to be sort of bombarded with emails out of hours or over the weekend. That's one kind of tip and trick. And then also knowing how and when to say no, and feeling empowered that people can say no to certain things if it doesn't fit around their schedule, and being more transparent with people as well in terms of sort of the hours that you're operating within. Because again, because people are remote and in different places, it may suit them to work late at night or early in the morning, whereas it may not suit someone else. So being able to indicate to people, when you're working and what your hours of operation are has been something that's been important too. So just a couple of things that we do and ideas as well for others.
So Sanjeev and Jim, before I let you answer this question, there's one from the chat that I want to kind of put into that, as we're talking about global and we're talking about wellness of employees. And we also talked about multi-language, as we are now much more borderless in our world and hoping to continue to keep that in our workplace. They talk, there's a question from Vaughn. It says, culture is typically local. Even if Google is able to allow you to translate the language, how will you avoid small insults or other barriers from nonverbal communications with remote working across cultural lines? So that's a good, big question. So Sanjeev, I'll let you go, and then Kelly and Jim.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. I think what we've tried to do is we work across multiple geographies, as many companies do, of course, today, right? So where we have people in other geographies, especially from other cultures, what we've tried to do is give some ideas and education around what's the norm in that area. So when you're working across boundaries, you can hopefully be cognizant of that. The other one is also we've tried to do various cultural events locally as well, so people feel more part of that community as well, even though they're remote as well. So because different countries have had different lockdown regimes, let's call them, or constraints, that we try to have local ones. Like in Italy, they were having lockdown much more stricter than in the UK, or in certain states in North America, in Florida, and others. So try to make it much more local, and have those connections more local with other people, so you can be better off. So, but that's a tough one because it applies not just through the online platform medium, but also just doing business in general. But we've had a broad education around that.
So Kelly, maybe I'll let you, or Jim, either one of you.
Yeah, no magic bullet here either. In terms of just sharing information, cultural awareness, we have a number of kind of courses around that, but you can always make mistakes. And even me being British, believe it or not, compared with American, we may speak the same language, but it's not entirely the same language. And sometimes I'll say sayings and no one's got a clue what I'm talking about, you know. So even with cultures that are somewhat proximate, you know, we still have challenges. So just being kind of tolerant with one another. We have a saying at Google, which is always assume best intent. And that's something that I think is really important as well, that generally people are not trying to insult other people. So if something happens, then assume the best intent, and maybe it's a moment to educate others on, you know, what they should or could be saying to adapt to another culture.
Yeah,
I think Renee, just to weigh in a little bit, I think the idea is mutual respect. You know, whether you had your employees all in one physical location or you have your workforce in many different locations, like I've had for many years, you still have to know your employees, and you still get to know them. You get to know your workforce. So whether it's contractor workforce or whether it's and you treat them special, you treat them all with respect, and treat them with, and give them the tools and capabilities. Just an earlier point, just to raise, one thing that I did was I had an open office physically. People could walk in and talk to me anytime. Well, you could do that with the tools too. And you can leave that where people could walk in. It's still awkward. It was awkward before because if people were scared of you for whatever reason, or, you know, frightened of the,
you're a very scary looking man, Jim.
I know that. Most people were most people were more, and just didn't want to feel like they're interrupting you. And once they get over that, though, then they would be able to walk in. But I think it's really adapting to multiple cultures. And I think it's a manager's responsibility to understand that. And how can you get the most out of that and understand and respect those cultures? So that's really the main point that I see. And I think the tools are going to make that easier. I think as we evolve these and we learn how to do this, it's going to get better. But I think there's still a lot of learning curve to go through.
I guess, and I'll probably just, follow up on that comment. So I too have always had Mechlin, Belgium, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Dublin, Ireland, Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, you name it, that's my staff. And so having had it virtually, I probably was not as adept at my virtual as I am now, but having a drop in, and sometimes they didn't have to drop in physically with the face, they could just drop in a chat. But if you put that time on your calendar, and sometimes you also have to get a global calendar on your laptop because that's the way it works. And Kelly, I love the idea of deferring sending out an email, because I'm working certain hours doesn't mean everyone else has to get up in the middle of the night just because I happen to be a certain spot on the org chart. That's insensitive of me to send such a note. But we would have drop-ins, and I would pick up certain times of the week where they could drop in on chat, video if they want to be brave. They could come in on video and not just have a picture of them with their dog or their family. And that's what we did. And over time, you saw more and more people less scared of the situation, and you started to see them more live. But it takes a while, and it's incumbent upon leadership and managers to do that. And if managers don't have the skills and need to be trained on it, then they need to push hard to say, I need more tools and sensitivity training to do this, because I think it's going to continue to be this way. But I also think it's a super awesome way to have that diversity of thought and workforce that makes every answer to every business problem better. So we can harness the power of that if we just get a little better with how we do it and continue to push that envelope. So I know I'm conscious of time, but I do want to get really this question in, and I know we all don't have crystal balls, or maybe we do, of trying to hypothesize what is the future going to look like. And maybe we say, what is the future going to be of the workforce, or maybe what is it not going to be if we've all learned something through COVID? And I'll serve that up either way and have you each maybe take a stab at that. So Sanjeev, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I know I'm not going to be flying to Madrid for a 1-hour meeting on Monday. That's for sure, right? I think those days are over. I'm in a client business, so naturally I like to go and see clients wherever they are, whether in Boston or New York or wherever. But I think people are just a lot more aware and a lot more understanding that you'll come for the important meeting, but you're okay doing it over an hour and a half, or whatever it is, over the online platform, Google Meet or whatever that is. So that's really good. And I think also even those ones where I don't know, maybe I'm optimistic here, but I think people are a lot more understanding of people's personal constraints as well. This is because we've brought the technology into our homes. I think, people and clients and other workers now are a lot more understanding. If you say, well, actually, it's my son's, graduation today, high school graduation or whatever, I can't make it. Could you mind if we do this over online rather than in person? In the past, you might have been a bit hesitant to say that, but now I think it's a lot more open. I'm hoping it is, so that when it is my son's high school graduation, I can say that. And then the client will say, yeah, sure, let's do it over a Google Meet or whatever, and the online platform, and then let's have that. So I think that's going to change a little bit. And I'm hoping also that, when we've talked to my colleagues, going in on a Tuesday and a Thursday where we can, nothing beats face-to-face at the end of the day. The chemistry, the body language, just to have a coffee with someone and just, and then someone else to bump into someone when they're coming down the corridor or whatever. That's all great. So I think going in on a hybrid way, which seems to be people's thinking, I think is thinking how people are going to be working. So I think hopefully that's what it's going to be like, a lot more flexibility and a lot more, hopefully, understanding.
Okay, Kelly, crystal ball. What do you see? What don't you see?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with all the comments that Sanjeev made in terms of, not flying just for flying's sake for a 1 hour meeting, but being much more thoughtful about when to go face to face versus, when to stay virtual. But what I would say is, though, that I don't think we're at the final point with our design, and it's going to be really important to remain somewhat fluid and listen and see how we adapt over time. Because I think we all think we know how the things are going to play out, but we don't necessarily. And I think what we're going back actually in California on the 12th of July. So Google overall is not officially back till September, but we've got the option of kind of going back in July. And it's going to be really interesting to see, is there going to be a big rush to kind of go? And then people are like, oh, that was interesting to see people, but now I'm kind of quite happy being back remotely, and actually how many days people go in and for what type of activities as well. So I think it's going to be a kind of watch and learn and be flexible to adjust our plan over time as we see how this plays out. Because it's never been done before, right? So I don't think that any one company can claim to know what the final answer is, but I think these kind of sessions where we're learning and we're sharing ideas will be really important to continue, particularly as some regions and countries will go back at different speeds, because of course there are parts of the world which unfortunately are still very much in the pandemic, whereas in some parts of the world like California we're starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, I think, to be able to return to some sort of form of normality.
Yep. Hey, Jim, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm also going to bring in from Andy in our chat session. It says, Jim pointed out the remote employee is at a disadvantage with less exposure to others who are on site. What strategies are you considering to prevent those remote employees from falling behind? And I would say, as we forecast the future and what the future looks like, I'm not sure that the employees that are remote will fall behind, but see what you think. What do you think,
Well,
Jim?
I think there's a chance that some could, and I think managers have to understand that and help them out and be proactive about that. I actually think travel will increase. Will it be what it was? Probably for different reasons. I think if you do business travel, part of it may be to go see your employees, and then be able to connect with the office from there, from wherever you are. So you may see that hybrid type of world occur, especially as the tools and capabilities. Meetings. Think about one of the reasons that people get all tensed up is they're going to miss a meeting because they have a scheduling conflict. You could record the meeting and you can look at that meeting later. or do something that I failed at miserably. I try to attend 2 or 3 virtual meetings at the same time. Turns out I can't do that very well, but maybe others can, and maybe they can, be more productive that way. But and the tools will adapt to that. But I think you're going to see, the world flip a little bit, especially as things open. People do want to travel for the experience and get the experience of that locale. And I think that's what's going to sort of increase, while at the same time having that remote capability, so that that becomes a good option when it's necessary. So I think you're going to see that. Now, how do we measure productivity? How do we look at the experience for the individual? It's been a strategy of mine for years that you look at how you could be the most effective for that employee, to allow that employee to be most effective. And then efficiency comes over time, because you can't forget about efficiency. And I think the technologies are allowing us to do that. And the technologies, whether it's from Google or the integration that comes from Cognizant, or it's the world of IT, we're still changing, and we have a long way to go. And I think you're going to see the results of that very quickly in the workplace, as we adapt and hopefully learn from everything we've gone through to be better prepared for the future. Because my guess is we will have another pandemic, on the horizon at some point in time. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think we got to be prepared for it.
So I want to just maybe follow up on that. So I definitely, like you, Sanjeev, not going to take, an hour meeting in London from the big island Hawaii in person. That's brutal. However, if it makes sense, and kind of, Jim, to your point, if I can go to my UK office and I can do my all hands that I was going to maybe do from, say, the California office, but I'll do it in person, all hands in my UK office, and everyone else is remote, you're kind of switching the dynamic a little bit. The remote workers that always used to watch you now are part of the audience, and everyone else around the world is remote. Those are the type of things you can take advantage of even more. Yeah. I used to always do that, but now I think I'm even more mindful of, when I get to a place, where's my staff? Where's my colleagues? Let's be sure we relate one-on-one or as a group in person, and make that the center of attention, because it's a privilege now to travel, make good use of that time, and then reconnect the other world from a different context or different perspective. So I used to do all hands from India all the time, because I thought that was, look, you all don't know what's here. Let's do all hands with my headquarters in India, and you all join us, because it's super fun to give everyone a perspective. And I think more of that's going to happen over time now with this virtual. Everyone's a little more comfortable with virtual.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. When we used to, I haven't been to India for a while now because of obviously the pandemic, but when we used to go to India, we have a lot of offices in India, in Chennai and wherever, we'd always do like a local town hall and try and connect the remote folks as well, who are part of the team. But now I think we're just a lot more comfortable with this technology. We'll just get them online. And so we will have more of a one team approach, rather than, okay, we did the town hall for the folks in Chennai, let's go and do one for the folks in London on the way back to Boston or something like that. So I think that's a great idea. But just one thing, I may actually come over to Hawaii for the 1 hour meeting. I'll be happy to do that.
You're welcome anytime. Weather's beautiful. Well, so I know we have one final question, and this is kind of what can we give to our virtual audience as a takeaway? And it's to all of us. So we are considering the future of work. We've talked about wellness. We've talked about don't leave, no employee left behind, whether they be in the office or virtually. What one piece of advice you personally, from your heart as a senior leader, you have experience at Google, at Cognizant, at Avasant, what one piece of advice would you give those listening about their workforce, their corporate culture, and the return to the office? And any of you are welcome to go first. So, go ahead.
Shall I start, as I'm not on mute right now? So I think a couple of things. One is, I think many of us have learned to listen a lot more, be open a lot more, think about mental wellness and mental health a lot more over the last couple of years, 18 months, let's say. I think I would say, let's carry that on, number one. Number two, I would say, let's try and provide that balance and flexibility for people to recognize the individual situations. Because I think Jim mentioned, this pandemic idea is, it's going away for a little while, but something else will happen. And we just got to get used to working in this sort of mixed mode environment. And then the last thing I would say is we're all still learning. No one has all the answers. So even on here, I loved a couple of things about that Kelly said and that Jim said. I'm going to take away an idea. So let's all just continue to learn from folks around this.
Hey, Kelly, I'll let you go next, and Jim will let you close it out.
Yeah, very similar theme. So I think stay agile. So not expecting to have all the answers, and don't forget about the full person and not just the work person. So let's take the learnings that we got from the pandemic of allowing children on laps and pets in the videos and goodness knows what else to kind of continue and make it a great part of an inclusive culture moving forwards.
Excellent. Jim?
I think diversity is defined in many different ways. It's diverse cultures, people, geography, and we have to take all of that into account as a way of better providing your services, products, results that you're trying to achieve versus maybe some of the other ways we used to do it that were very local intensive. And so how do you promote that? How do you have those capabilities? The technologies are not all there yet, but with purpose they will be. And the fact that if everybody's working in this kind of mode to include more people, I think it was Sanjeev who mentioned about someone working from an army base. Well, it could be a disabled person. It could be a person who has all the talent in the world, but they can't communicate the same way we can. Now they become employable. And then my final thought is that we're going to have partnerships. The future workforce, it may be that you have different partnerships, and you may want to create a virtual company. And that virtual company comes together without all the barriers that the existing companies have to provide a new environment for providing a new type of product and service that comes out of that then the other companies could absorb in. And I think it's going to be that kind of imaginative and creative future that's possible given where the technologies like cloud, translation, collaboration, networking, those kind of things, we're all very addicted to having very good networking now. And we're not going to go backwards. 5G, Wi-Fi 6, those are the baseline now. And what's it going to be after that, where we're always connected and we're always able to work multiple things at the same time with a very diverse workforce? Can we increase the enjoyment for the workforce as well as the productivity?
That's great words. I think in kind of summing this all up, I do believe the workforce of the future is bright based on the talent and the panelists today giving some great ideas. I think positive intent always. So we're going to probably be in our agile experimentation days as we all come back to the office, and the geopolitical world will dictate some of that. And we have to be mindful and understanding, each and every one of us, for that, and how that works and how we make the best of this borderless workforce going forward with diversity, inclusivity, and digital being those three themes. I think I've learned a couple also tips and tricks I'm going to try and be much more mindful when I hit send on an email around the globe, what time of the day or night it is, because no one has to answer my emails that fast. And be just a little more thoughtful on my side, whether I'm an employee or whether I'm a manager or leader. I think that assume positive intent always, but also be thoughtful and empathetic to that other person who's receiving your direction or your message through video chat, or maybe as a remote worker who doesn't have the ability to be on screen all the time. Be empathetic to that as well and see how else you can relate to them. So with that, I think this was an amazing set of panelists. For those that weren't able to attend or hear the whole thing, I know we have a recording of the session. We look forward to feedback from all of you for the next round of some of these great topics that are as a result of the pandemic. As I said, let's turn lemons into lemonade. And I think we have found some great golden nuggets today in what we've learned from the last year and a half of COVID. So thank you, panelists. Big round of applause for you and our virtual audience. Thank you so much for tuning in.
And thank you to you, Renee. Thank you to all of today's speakers and participants, and a special thank you to Cognizant for partnering with us. Like Renee mentioned, a replay of the digital forum will be available, as well as the slides. They will be emailed to everyone, and they'll also be available on Avasant's event page. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.